Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered today on the 18th of January, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar, which happens to line up with the 9th of the 11th month on our Creator's calendar as we comprehend it. What some people call the Zadok calendar or the Enochian calendar, although it takes a little more than what is just in the book of First Enoch, as they call it, or Hanok, to get everything that is in there. It is literally what is found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls and all of the scriptures to the best of our knowledge. Some people who keep this calendar are a week off from us. Generally, maybe there might be more divergent ones that I'm not aware of, but we all have the same general comprehension of how it functions, and most of us are on the same page that you can't intercalate because it simply says not to in the text, and we can't add to or take away, right? But that's a different thing. We're continuing with what we're reading. We just finished up with Exodus chapter 24. We had gone through the 10 commandments and the judgments and ordinances that he gave on the mountain before calling Moshe up for 40 days and 40 nights. That is what I've been telling everyone, what the common law of America and Britain stems from. It's the foundation of our common law for our countries, literally as the seed of Abraham, as the bearers of this covenant that have been carrying it down through history, not perfectly. They've been paganized on a few occasions. They've been a Catholic, they've gone to Catholicism and back. But the common law, the covenant given for his people, has been carried down by them since the time it was given. And we have record that the common law, literally the ordinances from Exodus, were being kept as statutes of common law in England or Britain before it was called England, all the way back to I think it was 510 BC by the Celtic king Melmontis. But it was later codified again by King Alfred the Great. This is a PDF that we shared in the description of last week's YouTube video. And then this is about King Alfred and the common law. I wanted to direct you really quickly to page 6, because on there, he actually covers the heart of what I've been saying. And I just wanted to read that to you real quick so you can see it. And I'm sorry that we didn't cover it last time, but it is relevant. So it says, however, Alfred's most important work was certainly his law code. He never called it his law code, he called it his dooms, which are judgments. It says, it is preceded by a long introduction. This contains translations not only of the 10 Commandments, but also of many other passages from the book of Exodus. The footnote right here tells you it's from chapters 20 to 23. The ordinances that we literally just read, I told you, that is the common law, right? It is followed by an excerpt from Mashiach's Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is the common law. Do unto others what you want done to you, and everything that he told there. And a brief account of apostolic history with quotations from the apostolic book of Acts, the part where it talks about what to do as believers, mentioning that in every place Moshe is read on the Sabbath, and these are the things that you must do to separate from what makes you unprofitable. Strangled things, blood, and eating things offered to idols and the like, right? So it says there, Alfred stresses the jots and tittles, alias the minutiae of Elohim's law and his foretellers, right? The golden rule and the El-inspired decision of the first General Assembly of the Nazarene Assembly in order to teach El's law and his foretellers, Amos 9:11, as well as his good news also in the congregations of Mashiach. So you see, he literally established what was in Scripture as the foundational law of how the country was supposed to function. And that is the common law that we've carried over to America, that it's not codified by a man. That's why they say there's no written law of it, but it's from Scripture. We've just forgotten that, and it's been intentionally obfuscated by enemies of the truth. It says, then King Alfred goes on to trace the growth of the assembly's law as laid down by various ecclesiastical councils, both ecumenical and English. The concluding words of his introduction, and these I'd say are only as binding as they are in agreement with his word. As soon as you get to the Council of Nicaea, there's things in it that are perverted that should not be followed, but yet that's held to by and professed by every Protestant organization. So it's something that we ought to be more careful about as a body politic and look into. I'm not saying, oh, you must believe me and turn from things. I'm saying we've been lied to about everything. We ought to be careful and prove all things, like he said, not just hold on to tradition. Thus, Alfred first sets out the Ten Commandments verbatim. The only difference is he put the second commandment at the end because it had been removed by Catholics. He translated his out of the Latin version, which was translated out of the original Celtic from Malmontis's time into Latin when the Romans had came to the area. But it says, and then from passages Exodus 21:2 to 23:9, he recites many of the Old Testament case laws, or the things that happen in the judgments of them, because that is the common law and the foundation of case law. For anyone that's familiar with how that's supposed to work and how it actually works today, it's not quite the same. But case law, or stare decisis, what has been laid down, is based off of original covenant principles and things that are literally laid down. And then what we would say becomes case law is trial by jury, rulings by juries of your peer. And they're supposed to try you by the common law, which is scripture. So I'm willing. That's starting to make more sense how these things work. This is then he moves on to the renewed covenant, citing from Mashiach's Sermon on the Mount and also from the Acts of his apostles. Finally, Alfred records his own case laws for the medieval England, and these are things that are relevant to their times, laying down things according to these principles, using what he calls the equity of the law. Alfred declares that when Mashiach came to the Mediterranean world, or Middle Earth, he himself did approve the judgments, alias the judicial laws, very far from ever having abrogated or destroyed them. He himself, therefore, still requires that at least their general equity be observed. And I'd say no, they should be observed according to what he actually wants us to do, not just the general equity. The general equity principle should be for everything not clearly laid down, where you have clear rules on what you should do about cows and sheep. You have no set standard for different animals necessarily, or their value in relation to cattle. That's something that would have to be worked out under the general equity. It also doesn't have to do with actual monetary values for non-cattle products. That would have to be done by the general equity, where if the thief was caught with it, he would pay double the monetary value, and if he had sold it, it's 4 to 5 times depending. Because that's literally what's laid down in the general equity of it, right? The principles behind that. This was clearly also Alfred's own comprehension and legislative endeavor. He does, of course, certainly distinguish between the old Israeli or Yisraeli format of the judicial laws of Moses on the one hand, and the general equity thereof on the other. This can be seen by King Alfred's own adaptation of those old laws or case laws to meet the different conditions of early medieval Anglo-Saxon Britain. This is what they mean by taking the case laws and using the equity that's in scripture to make law, right? Compare, for example, Alfred's own laws 11 and 27 and 44 through 47. And these are in his dooms that we don't have available at the moment. It says, yet, in so adapting, King Alfred clearly preserves and enforces within English common law the general equity of those old Israelitic judicial laws. Again, what I was trying to mention, for things that are not clearly laid down, because not everything has to do with corn and cattle. You have to use the general principles or the equity, the right ruling, the equality that you find in them and apply it in the circumstances as they are. This is what a jury of your peers would have to do under the common law. It says, to prove this, just compare the statements of Mosaic law with Alfred's Anglo-British common law and also with the Westminster Confession of Faith and the Westminster Larger Catechism. For catechumen is a taught one or an instructed. A talmudim in Hebrew would be a catechumen. So the catechisms are teachings, the things that you would give to someone that you're trying to train. You can say these are little snippets of Talmud. Now, I don't mean it's the Talmud in that sense. The Catholics have catechisms, the Protestants have catechisms because that's a Latin word. The Yahudim use the Talmud because that's the Hebrew word. That's my point, but that's the meaning. It says, for the new covenant itself at Yahuah 5 through 21, and 1 Timothy 5, 17 through 21, etc., presupposes inter alia, Exodus 21, or 20, verse 1 through 23, verse 9, in the Old Testament. It inter alia, because not everyone might know what that means. It is among other things. It's Latin, right? So it presupposes that these are applicable, right? And it says Alfred cites Exodus as well as Matthew and Acts. The Westminster Confession cites Exodus as well as Matthew and 1 Corinthians. So I'm trying to show you all of these things are codified in the common law, right? After recording Exodus 20, verse 1 through 23, verse 9, King Alfred declares, these are judgments which El Shaddai himself, with Almighty El himself, spoke to Moshe and commanded him to keep. Now, since Yahuah's only begotten Son, our Elohim and healing Savior, Mashiach, has come to Middle Earth, he said that he did not come to break nor to forbid these commandments, but to approve them all well, or to approve them well, and to teach them with all mild-heartedness and lowly-mindedness. Matthew 5, 5 through 19, the Westminster Confession of Faith. It says, then, after his throes or sufferings, before his apostles had gone throughout the earth to teach, and while they were yet together, they turned many heathen nations to Elohim. While they were all together, they sent Aaron writing to Antioch and to Syria, there to teach Mashiach's law. Acts 11, 19 through 26. This is then that errand writing which the apostles sent to Antioch and to Syria and to Cilicia, which is meet for the heathen nations turned to Mashiach. And this is also part of the common law. So everyone that is not already under the law immediately must abstain from those and then seek to read the Torah to learn what to do, just like everybody else through these times. I don't need to read all of this. You guys know where it's at in Exodus, or in Acts chapter 15 here, right? And you can read it for yourselves. This is Alfred then shows that the apostles such as Paul and Barnabas clearly upheld the general equity of the law of Elohim, explained the apostles It seems good to the set apart Ruach and to us that we should not impose any burden upon you beyond that which was needful to hold. That is, then that you should refrain from worshiping devil guilds or idols and from devil guilds, okay? Devils are things that stir stuff up, and the guilds are that's the thing it inhabited, or the pretty trinket that the demon would be attached to. And that's what the idols are. And from tasting blood and stranglings, and from fornication. You do these, and then you study the law to conform as you learn as time goes on. But these things, if you remember, even will pollute immersion if you do them. Fatally pollute immersion. This is explained in detail by Kepha in the Recognitions of Clement. This says, and this is King Alfred here. It says, for it needs to be remembered that Alfred had already first rejoined the Decalogue or the Ten Commandments, then illustrated their concrete application by way of case law. And that's what we said. The ordinances were just applicable, it's practical application of how to love your neighbor and how to love your maker. We love Elohim by loving our fellow man and guarding his commands, just like he said to, right? That's what's in Yahuah. That's what he tries to explain throughout the scriptures. It says, and next assured his readers that Mashiach had not come back or had not come to break the Ten Commandments, but to approve them well. Indeed, Alfred had then gone on, together with all of Mashiach's 12 apostles, to enjoin, representative from the Decalogue, respectively, the second and the sixth and the seventh commandments in the second table of Elohim's law for man. This is seen quite clearly in the apostolic prohibitions enjoining abstinence from idolatry, bloodshed, and fornication. So it goes on, and I'd let you guys read that on your own. I just wanted to show real quick what we had mentioned last week, where I was trying to say it, but I didn't actually bring this up, that these are the things that are codified in what's called the common law, which is the law of our country, both in America, England, Canada, Australia, every place where you have the common law as prevalent as the supreme law of the land, or the foundation of the supreme law of the land. That is in direct opposition to canon law, or Justinian code, what we call municipal law or statutes, something that sadly is prevalent throughout all these places as well, but they're not really applicable. They're just being usurped, and we are being victims, mostly through ignorance. But enough of this part for now. The next thing I would like to share with you is the book of Yobelim, and we have two things that we're really going to cover here, if we can get to it in time today. If not, then we'll cover the next one tomorrow. But this, as you can see, it's called the Division of the Days of the Torah and of the Testimony. This is actually the title that was in the Hebrew on top of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we call it Yobelim or Jubilees, but they would have titled it just like Exodus is Shemot, Bereshit is Genesis. It's literally the first words of the book. This was called the Division of the Days by the people that kept it. And they have quoted that title a few places in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. But it says, this is the history of the division of the days of the Torah and of the testimony of the events of the years, of their weeks, festivals of the covenant, of their Sabbaths, of their Yobelim, throughout all the years of the world. And that only makes sense if you realize that he's doing things in parables, because it only goes till the 2,410 years from creation. But in parable form, he's given the three types of ages in the three patriarchs, the going into captivity, the long stay in idolatry, the imprisonment and everything that would happen in parables, the coming out of that with plagues and wondrous signs, as well as the wandering through the wilderness for these times of judgment until we're brought into the promised land. So it's parables in which he had fulfilled, speaking of this throughout the whole, what would happen throughout the world. And we'll get that in more detail in these first two chapters. Ob willing, you'll see it clearly. But it says, as Yahuah spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai when he went up to receive the tables of the Torah and of the commandment, according to the voice of Yahuah, as he said to him, go up to the top of the mountain. It says, and it came to pass in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt. And this is significant right here because this is a dating system. I don't mean to keep cutting in like that all the time, but when these things pop up, I think it's important. You'll find this kind of reckoning for time found on tombstones by the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. You'll find it written in the Declaration of Araboth, the Declaration of Independence for Scotland in 1320 by Robert the Bruce and the Catholic Scots that were petitioning the Little Horn to allow them to be their own nation. It was only being attacked because the Caledonians had been pious and had fought off Catholicism for a long time, and they were the ruling party. But after the secession, Edward Longshanks came in, and the things that happened with that, it was Catholics appealing to the Little Horn to be sovereign again, and he gave it to them, and Scots kept the nation, Robert the Bruce reigning at that time. What isn't so clearly shown, though, or what people fail to recognize, is that even though they might have been apostate at that time, that document is amazing. The Declaration of Araboth clearly admits that they've been sojourning from the time that the children of Exodus, Egypt. It gives the very dates, just like this. And it mentions very clearly that they were taught the good news by the emissary Andari, or Andrew, Kepha, Shimon Kepha's brother, what most people know as Simon Peter's brother. He was known to go to the Scythians, or the Sakai, the Saxons, the sons of Yitzhak that were still over by the Caspian and Black Sea. He was a missionary or apostle to them, and they generally turned to the belief at that time, some of them, not all of them. A large portion broke off, migrated, and eventually landed in Ireland, and then went to Caledonia and became known as the Scots. And these were the people that were appealing to the Little Horn. So they directly know where they come from, and they mention it in that document. They use the dating just like the references right here, but they don't directly say that they are the children of Israel. However, we have undisputable evidence that the Sakai, the Scythians, the so-called sons of Yitzhak there, were Hebrews from the northern kingdom. It's unequivocal. It's known from a variety of sources for many years, historically, linguistically, through archaeology, with the writings and documents from the Assyrians. Um, and these things have been known for over 200 years. We have books as late as the 1990s being written about this very topic. I don't know if there have been any afterwards proving the Northern Kingdom is these people, but I do know that there was one written then. The gentleman's name is E. Raymond Capt, and it's called The Missing Links. Actually, I have the book right here with me, so sorry about that. It was copywritten in 1985. But either way, there's a lot of evidence to show who these people are, and we'll get to those in the course of time as we go and we get to those events more generally. What we've already had happen through this time, we've already talked about, so I don't want to recap that, but we'll get to it again as we're reading. Either way, it says, and it came to pass in the first year of the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt in the third month, on the 16th day of the month, 2450 Anno Mundi. That's not right. It should be 2410. 2,410 years from creation. that Yahuah spoke to Moshe, saying, Come up to me on the mount, and I will give you 2 tables of stone of the Torah and of the commandment which I have written, that you may teach them. And Moshe went up into the mount of Yahuah, and the splendor of Yahuah abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud overshadowed it 6 days. And he called to Moshe on the 7th day out of the midst of the cloud, and the appearance of the splendor of Yahuah was like a flaming fire on the top of the mount. And these are recapping the events that we had just read in the book of Exodus. You remember they arrived the same day they left on the 4th day of the week. They were told to set themselves apart for 3 days, that'd be fourth, fifth, or fifth, sixth, and 7th day. And then that following day, the first day of the week, the 15th of the first month, is when, with an audible voice, Yahuah spoke to them in the flaming fire from the top of Mount Sinai. Now that one who was there physically is our Mashiach, the messenger in whom the Father's name is in, that they had to listen to, that he said would go before them. So that's the one hiccup people seem to have, that we, Father willing, will make very clear in the course of reading these things. But if you just keep in mind that the Father is not physical, he is not confined, there's no limit to him, he's infinite. He cannot be divided or contained, right? He cannot be diminished. Our Mashiach is the completeness of Elohim bodily. So if you keep those things in mind, then when you read stuff that doesn't seem to make sense, it will, if you realize that they're the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's always been this way from the beginning. And his taught ones were given full revelation, and they make it very clear in the apostolic writings and the writings after he came, the things that were hidden beforehand. But this writing in itself, if you pay attention, will show who's speaking very clearly. It says, and Moshe was on the mount 40 days and 40 nights, and Yahuah taught him the earlier and latter history of the division of all the days of the Torah and of the testimony. And he said, Incline your heart to every word which I speak to you on this mount, and write them in a book. That book that he wrote was the book of the law that was later kept next to, and then it was eventually put in the Ark of the Covenant. That is separate from this um, writing right here. If you'll see in just a moment, the messenger is told to dictate it to him. It says, and write them in a book in order that their generations may see how I have not forsaken them for all the evil which they have wrought in transgressing the covenant which I established between me and you for their generations this day on Mount Sinai. And thus it will come to pass, when all these things come upon them, that they will recognize that I am more righteous than they in all their judgments and in all their actions, and they will recognize that I have been truly with them. Other versions say I have been true with them, but this one is, and both are accurate. He has been true with us, and he's truly been with us. There isn't a thing that our Mashiach has not made a man suffer that he did not suffer himself, or including death. He, in another example, he told the rich man, one thing you lack, go sell your possessions and give to the poor and come follow me, and you shall have treasures in the Shamayim. He wasn't asking him to do anything except for what he himself had not already done, giving up all his treasures for our benefit and giving to the poor. It says, and do you write for yourself all these words which I declare unto you this day? For I know their rebellion and their stiff neck, before I bring them into the land which I swore to their fathers, to Abraham, and to Yitzhak, and to Jacob, saying, Unto your seed will I give a land flowing with milk and honey. and they will eat and be satisfied, and they will turn to strange Elohim, or the word in Hebrew is Elohim Achrim. That Acher is to come after, to be some new one that came lately. Strange that your fathers did not know, as it's mentioned in Deuteronomy 32, the song of Yahuah, right? But the strange mighty ones are the ones that come after, that are not the ones that are originally established, that our father Abraham told his children to follow. Anything other than Yahuah Elohim of the Hebrews, right? He says, to which cannot deliver them from aught of their tribulation, and this witness shall be heard for a witness against them. For they will forget all my commandments, all that I command them. Remember, what he speaks happens. So he's telling us the things that will be, and it's a surety, because what he speaks is reality. The words of his mouth are ruach and life, he says. It says, for they will forget, Menashe, the cause to forget, right? For they will forget my commandments, all that I command them, and they will walk after the nations, and after their uncleanness, and after their shame, and will serve their mighty ones, and these will prove unto them an offense, and a tribulation, and an affliction, and a snare. Now, we don't see it so clearly today because we have a lot of confusion and a lot of reasons for it, but in the course of time, you'll see that all of these festivals that we've been traditionally keeping as children, all the stuff that we learn, it comes from what we call paganism. And while that really doesn't have a meaning to us today, in reality, if you want to be clear about it, it's a form of witchcraft, because paganism is witchcraft. It was just open religion before the belief of our Mashiach went throughout the world. And witchcraft, when you bring it back to its source, is worship or venerating the first anti-Christ, the first anti-Mashiach Nimrod, the one who rebelled and tried to put himself in place of as a deified man. And all that stuff is a usurpation. When you know it, it's easier to just cast it away and have nothing to do with it. But beforehand, if you're involved with it, it's just like he said, we would do these things. It would happen. He would take away his festivals and Sabbaths. And then you find another witness for this very phenomenon in the book of Hosea. Husha, or Hushia, right? If you want to go by what it says in the Greek, it's Osi. I don't know how they pronounce it, but in the English, it's just Osee, Osi. Um, the point is, in that the foreteller specifically has been given foretellings of the northern kingdom that you can read, and you can infer what it even means, but you don't have to guess. You can take that very writing, go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and read the very interpretations of what he tells you it means. And then it's very, very clear. It's saying the exact same things. We would forget this stuff and do pagan things instead. Acknowledging that and repenting is what's required for us to have healing in our country. It says, and many will perish, and they will be taken captive, and they will fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have forsaken my ordinances and my commandments and the festivals of my covenant and my Sabbaths and my Kodesh place, which I have set apart for myself in their midst, and my tabernacle and my sanctuary, which I have set apart for myself in the midst of the land, that I should set my name upon it, and that it should dwell, meaning that his name should dwell there. So this very thing This very thing you see happening during the time of Judges. It's a type and picture of what has been going on since the Reformation in America, too, where we have no king but our Creator. We're in covenant with Him. And while we're in open rebellion, our enemies have rule over us in the very same capacity. And we are in that type of wilderness before He returns to bring us into the promised land. Same picture. He says, and they will make to themselves high places and groves and graven images, and they will worship each his own, so as to go astray, and they will sacrifice their children to demons and to all the works of the error of their hearts. And I will send witnesses unto them that I may witness to them, or sorry, against them. But they will not hear, and will slay the witnesses also, and they will persecute those who seek the Torah, and they will abrogate and change everything so as to work evil before my eyes. The very things that you saw happen in a microcosm exactly after they came into the land, again, type of the time of the judges until the type of millennial reign with the coming of the beloved, the elimination of all the enemies of the beloved, and then the type of millennial kingdom with Shalomo. It says, and I will hide my face from them, and I will deliver them into the hand of the Gentiles or nations for captivity, and for a prey, and for devouring. And I will remove them from the midst of the land, and I will scatter them among the Gentiles. And this is exactly what you see with the divorce and separation of the northern kingdom, his hiding his face from them and delivering them up to the Gentiles with the Assyrians for prey and devouring, and removing them from the midst of the land, which he did, and scattering them amongst the nations, literally accomplished in the northern kingdom, where they went east, west, north, and south. You have multiple different waves over many years that's recorded in different ways and times throughout history, but literally fulfilled. And that not just to the northern kingdom, but it also happened to the southern kingdom with the Yahudim in a type later on. And while they were not hidden, they've been known. Um, the others had been generally forgotten. It says, and they will forget all my Torah and all my commandments and all my judgments, and will go astray as to Chodeshim, new months, and Sabbathoths, new Sabbaths, and festivals, and Yobelim, and ordinances. Please, please keep this in mind. All of the common law, which is the ordinances, right? But the Ten Commandments, the Torah, right? All the common law and commandments, we did forget. We haven't kept them. All his judgments, we've literally gone from them. Look at our country today in America. Look at the world. The new months, the four that are supposed to be kept, they're very, until the restoration of the calendar, they weren't, right? The same thing with the Sabbaths. Even, even people that profess to keep it for a long period of time, the Yahudim and the Seventh-day Adventists after them, they don't keep it according to how it's written. That's added to with keeping it the night before. Right. And then you have the festivals, which are clearly everyone that purports to keep the common law, they abrogate the festivals when you ought not to do that. It says with them, look at Leviticus 23 or I believe it's 23. These are perpetual. They're for your children, for their generations, unto ages. It's not something that is done away with. But he tells us that it would be put away, and it had been. But it's time that we get back to him, right? Same thing with the Yobelim and ordinances, all of which we've lost. And after this, they will turn to me from amongst the nations with all their heart, and with all their inner being, and with all their strength. We're in the process of getting this done right now. Since the 2010, you've had these waves of believers turning to the truth, not from the act of any man. Literal fulfillment after the literal fulfillment of these, just like he said. And he says, and I will gather them from amongst all the nations, and they will seek me, so that I shall be found of them when they seek me with all their heart and with all their soul. And I will disclose to them abounding shalom with righteousness, and I will remove them the plant of uprightness, and with all my heart and with all my soul. And they shall be for a baraka and not for a curse, and they shall be the head and not the tail. And I will build my set apart place in their midst, the one not made with hands. and I will dwell with them, and I will be Yahuah their Elohim, and they shall be my people in truth and righteousness. And I will not forsake them, nor fail them, for I am Yahuah their Elohim. And Moshe fell on his face and prayed, and said, Yahuah my Elohim, do not forsake your people and your inheritance, so that they should wander in the error of their hearts, and do not deliver them into the hands of the enemies, or their enemies, the nations, lest they should rule over them, and cause them to sin against you. Let your mercy, Yahuah, be lifted up upon your people, and create in them an upright ruach, and let not the spirit of Belial rule over them, to accuse them before you. The doctrine of the two spirits, or the two ruachot that rule over every man, right? The set apart ruach and the ruach of Satan. And it says, and to ensnare them from all the paths of righteousness, so that they may perish from before your presence. But they are your people and your inheritance, which you have delivered with your great power from the hands of the Mitzrayites or Egyptians. Create in them a clean heart and a Kodesh Ruach, and let them not be ensnared in their sins from henceforth until eternity. And Yahuah said to Moshe, remember, our Mashiach did not need for any man to vouch for another man, because he knew all men. He knows the minds of them. It says, and Yahuah said to Moshe, I know their contrariness and their thoughts and their stiff-neckedness, and they will not be obedient till they confess their own sin and the sin of their fathers, which is exactly what we're told to do in the book of Hosea, if you remember. Or I'm sorry, Yirmiyahu mentions that we've unprofited, we've only inherited lies and falsehood from our ancestors. So it's in Yirmiyahu that he mentions that. But we have to say these things. We have to acknowledge that we have inherited lies and sins, not only our own, but from our ancestors handed down to us. And after this, they will turn to me in all uprightness and with all their heart and with all their soul or inner being. And I will circumcise the foreskin of their heart and the foreskin of the heart of their seed. And I will create in them a Kodesh Ruach, and I will cleanse them so that they shall not turn away from me from that day unto eternity. Now, this is what's in the process of happening. And we're going to see another witness to these things in just a moment, God willing, if we can get to it. And their inner beings will cleave to me and to all my commandments, and they will fulfill my commandments, and I will be their Abba, or I will be their Ab. Abba means the father in Aramaic. The Ba is like Ha in Hebrew. So Ha'ab is the Hebrew version of Abba. It means the father. But it means I will be their Ab, or father, and they shall be my children. And they all shall be called children of the living Elohim. And every messenger and every spirit shall know, yes, they shall know that these are my children, and that I am their father in uprightness and righteousness, and that I love them. And do you write down for yourself all these words which I declare unto you on this mountain, the first and the last, which shall come to pass in all the divisions of the days in the Torah, and in the testimony, and in the weeks, and in the Yobelim, unto eternity, until I descend and dwell with them throughout eternity. And he said to the Melech of the presence, write for yourself from the beginning of creation till my sanctuary has been built among them for all eternity. And Yahuah will appear to the eyes of all. That's not the Father. Okay. The Father will, he will come when there's the renewed creation, when there's no more sin. But even then, he's a ruach. He's not physically seen. This is what people have to comprehend. The one who's physical, that indwells in a body, who's called Yahuah, has always been the beloved, the begotten of the Father. He was inheriting the name above every name, just as is written, just as he plainly says, Father, Barak them in the name, your name, which you have given me. He says it back to back. His emissaries also declare that he inherited the name above every name, so that everyone that believes that Yahushua is Yahuah to the esteem of Elohim the Father, right? Not that he is the Father, that's confusion, but we ought to believe the things that are said, not things that don't make sense. Anyways, that is something that will become very clear in the course of time. If anyone wants to have what was plainly said, I highly encourage everyone. There is a Syriac version of the Recognitions of Clement. The copy that I got a hard copy of is no longer available in print. It was very expensive when it was. Now it's unavailable. They have different ones in print that might have this version, but if not, I have a PDF copy of the Syriac version, the translation that I have a hard copy of. And in it, it has the 10 chapters from book 3 that is missing in the Latin and Greek version of the recognitions. When you look at Jackson Snyder's version, he goes into the footnotes and how they said it was utterly untranslatable and not of the best authority and other things. But when you look at what's being said, it's a refutation of the Catholic Trinity. So because that was not acceptable, they just didn't translate it. I highly encourage everyone to look at that, and then you won't be confused. But there is no co-equal, co-eternal anything. The Father is the only true Elohim. What Kepha says, he is the self-existent one who did not come into being. Yahuah, Yahushua, Mashiach is the firstborn of all creation, through which the Father was pleased to have all things made. And it's by the Ruach that our Mashiach speaks, and the Ruach of his mouth accomplishes the things that he says. That is the Kodesh Ruach that he breathed onto his taught ones, that he breathed into Adam to become a living being, right? It was our Mashiach that did that. All things came to be through him. So it's not confusing once you just take and accept the things that are written plainly, like a child, and don't add to or try to muck things up. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anyone that might be confused in the matter. None of us can come to these things clearly unless he allows it. I'm not special. It's literally by taking the words as they're plainly written and just accepting them that we are able to comprehend what is true. Everyone has to come to that same level of humility, or you're not gonna see it. All right, so continuing real quick. It says, and Yahuwah will appear to the eyes of all, and all shall know that I am the king, or Elohim of Yisrael, and the father of all the children of Yaakov, our Mashiach being called the father of the future age, and the one who's a father in Revelation at the end. This is the same capacity, right? He is not the father, his father, and ours, but he becomes like him. He's the one that's brought us through all this time and is like a father to us in that capacity, because as he sees, so he does. And he's king on Mount Zion for all eternity. And Zion and Yerushalayim shall be kadosh. And the messenger of the presence who went before the camp of Yisrael, this is our Mashiach, pre-incarnate, I believe, right? And you'll see that in the course of this writing. It says, he took the tables of the divisions of the years from the time of the creation of the Torah and of the testimony of the weeks of the Yobelim, according to the individual years according to all the number of the Yobelim, according to the individual years, from the day of the creation, when the Shamayim and the earth shall be renewed, and all their creation according to the powers of the Shamayim, and according to all the creation of the earth, until the set apart place of Yahuah shall be made in Yerushalayim on Mount Zion, and all the luminaries be renewed for healing, and for Shalom, and for Barakah, for all the elect of Yisrael. And that thus it may be from that day and unto all the days of the earth. And so this testimony is a copy of what shall be until the renewed Shamayim and earth. Everything here is a type up into the millennial reign. And right now you're going to see an echo of that very thing, where he gives you an account now through the creation story in parable form of everything that's going to happen until the millennial reign. So I'm willing, we'll read this and then we'll go over the other part. We've shared this before, but since we're reading it now, we'll do it again and maybe it'll help with everybody. But I would like to flesh this out more fully when I get an opportunity, and I highly encourage nobody to just take my word for it. Hear these things that I'm mentioning to you and then prove it. Go test it for yourself. Go read and study minutely every single point, every single word, every single letter, and then prove it for yourself, and it's an amazing thing. But I'm trying to explain to you, this right here, this account of creation is a parable of everything that the word would do through history until the millennial reign. So it says, and the Melech of the presence spoke to Moshe according to the word of Yahuah, saying, write the complete history of the creation, how in 6 days Yahuah Elohim finished all his works and all that he created, and kept Shabbat on the 7th day, and set it apart for all ages, and appointed it as a sign for all his works. On the first day he created the Shamayim, which are above, and that would be the heavens that are not visibly seen today. They're hidden right now. And the earth or land, and the waters, and all the Ruachoth with which serve before him, the messengers of the presence, the messengers of set apartness, and the messengers of the Ruach of fire, and the messengers of the Ruach of the winds, and the messengers of the Ruach of the clouds, and of darkness, and of snow, and of hail, and of hoarfrost, and the messengers of the voices, and of the thunder, and of the lightning. If you're not certain what these mean, it's literal thunders and lightning, that these are messengers, what we call angels, if you will, in Greek, but the Melachim are messengers, spirits that accomplish these things. It's not just a sound that happens, it's a spirit that is accomplishing that. Anything not seen that happens is a spiritual thing, like the wind. Wind in Hebrew is literally ruach. Ruach is wind, breath, and spirit. It's the same thing that we would call electromagnetism is ruach. It is spirits that are doing these things. We tend to think of it as natural sciences and normal phenomenon, but they are literally beings with commandments to accomplish. That's why when he commands them to do otherwise, the laws of nature are superseded by his sovereign will alone. Okay? But more particularly, if you look at the Antichrist for Dummies videos, he goes into detail about how the voices and the thunders and the lightnings are used even in our times as signs in the heavens to us. It says, and the messenger of the Ruachoth, or spirits of the cold and of heat, and of winter, and of spring, and of autumn, and of summer, and of all the Ruachoth, or all the inner beings of his creatures which are in the Shamayim and on the earth. And this is where men's souls, if you will, are created. And you'll see that in just a minute because it was part of the sons of Elohim that shouted for joy on that first day, which is mentioned in the book of Job. So it says, now that was all one work. The fourth work was the messengers, or all the Ruach that function everything. It's the change of state, right? And then continuing with the fifth work, it is the abysses, darkness. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one, yeah, darkness. And then you have this part is what's out of order. Evening is part of the light. It's a mixture of light and dark. It is not in its own work. And in the Vander Kamp translation, as well in the footnotes for R.H. Charles's translations of Yobelim and the first Hanok, he talks about these things. In the order that is listed here, it mentions that there's 7 works. The last one is light, which includes dawn, or light, which includes day, evening, and dawn. So 4 edges to that thing, like a weapon, if you will. This is which he prepared in the knowledge of his heart. And thereupon we saw his works and praised him. This is where all the sons of joy, or all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy on that first day. And we lauded before him on account of all his works, for 7 great works did he create on the first day. I tend to believe that that right there, that very act was the separation upon those that were sons of Elohim and those that were not. I can't prove that, but that's just what came to my mind when I was thinking about it. And there, or I read that one, sorry. And on the second day he created the firmament which in the midst of the waters, and the waters were divided on that day. Half of them went up above, and half of them went down below the firmament, or the dome, in the midst over the face of the whole earth. And this was the only work Yahuah created on the second day. Now, there's a lot about the firmament, and there's easy ways to show that it exists. More and more people are looking into that. An interesting phenomenon you can still find today is flight paths. In the north, flights can go as high as 39,000 feet or so, and they go that high to avoid lower flying traffic going the opposite direction. But in the southern latitudes, at the extreme southern areas, they don't fly higher than 11,000 feet. It's mentioned in the Encyclopedia Americana, in an older version that's no longer printed, that the dome was found at 13,000 feet at 80 degrees south, 90 degrees east. So very extreme south. It gets closer to the ground there. There's other phenomenon about that, but it's not important right now. One thing to keep in mind here, though, is that there was half of the water, whether it was exactly that amount or not, we can't say, but it tends to say that half went above. I tend to take him at his word. So we can say that all the waters that were below the firmament that were drained out of it that we're going to read, there's at least double right above it. All surrounding this enclosed environment, we have water, and it's perpetually being filtered and cycled through. So the idea of us having water shortages is it's manufactured sometimes, but it's only because of sin. These things, it's not possible to run out of water if you can think about how creation really is. Okay. This is, and on the second day he created the firmament. We read that part. We'll continue. Sorry. And it says, and this was the only work Yahuah created on the second day. And on the third day he commanded the waters to pass from off the face of the whole earth into one place, and the dry land to appear. And the waters did so as he commanded them, And they retired from off the face of the earth into one place outside of this firmament, and the dry land appeared. And on that day he created for them all the seas according to their separate gathering places, and all the rivers, and the gatherings of the waters in the mountains and on all the earth, and all the lakes, and all the dew of the earth. And this is all one work right there. That would be the letter Tet, the gatherings of the waters into all their separate habitations. Okay. And then you have Yod, sorry, is the seed which is sown in all sprouting things. Then you have the fruit-bearing trees and the trees of the wood, and the Garden of Eden, in Eden, and all. That might seem a little odd, but it seems to me, and I don't have all the answers to everything. I can only share with you what I know to be written to the best of my ability. It mentions Eden is in the allotment of Shem, and by how things are divvied up as we read these things in the accounts, it seems to be that Eden is right next to the land of Ham, where we'd say the land of Israel or Palestine is today, was considered Eden. In another um, in another way of looking at it, where you go to the four heads of those rivers, it ends up going right to where Babylon was, Kuwait today, and Iraq, southern Iraq, or where four riverheads used to go together, the Tigris, Euphrates, the Pishon, and the Gihon. But aside from those, it's also mentioned, I believe it's in the book of Yobelim or the book of First Enoch, Hanok, that the garden of righteousness is in the center, or the navel, right? The North Pole is what we'd call it, the North Center, where you have the four inflowing rivers. So whether they both are or one is, and it's disambiguity in the writings, I can't say for certain, but both are mentioned there, and I thought it'd be, worthwhile to point them out. If you happen to know of any other information, please don't hesitate to share. This is these four great works Yahuah created on the third day. And on the fourth day he created the sun and the moon and the stars, and set them in the firmament of the Shamayim to give light upon all the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. In the other Hebrew, it says literally to divide between the light and between the darkness. So there's dividings even between them, or even in both sections. What we would look at that from is everyone gets according to their own deserts. There's different levels of reward for everything, right? And Yahuwah appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and Sabbaths, and for months, and for feasts, and for years, and for Sabbaths of years, and for the Yobelim, and for all seasons of the years. In other words, just as our Mashiach was given all authority from the Father, so the Son, a type of the bridegroom, is given all authority for determining days, years, and all these things. It's a type and picture. The moon is like the kingdom. The moon has no authority. All right. It says, and it divides the light from the darkness, and for prosperity, that all things may prosper and shoot and grow on the earth. These three kinds he made on the fourth day. And this is true that the luminaries are for the prosperity and growth of all the living. The cycles of the moon is for the diversity of seasons. And you can look into these things. I have a little bit, I'm not overly familiar with them, but farmers' almanacs have information about them too. You plant certain things at the new moon and certain things at the full moon. You do it according to their types and kinds based on the season, quote unquote, and the lunar phase. And it all is supposed to go together for the benefit of the growth of the product, whatever it is. And depending on the kind it is and how you do it, it's all a picture. He's trying to teach a man reasonable things, right? It says, and on the fifth day he created great sea monsters in the depths of the waters, For these were the first works or the first things of flesh that were created by his hands, meaning they would be the last spiritual things, some of the last spiritual kingdoms to come about, right? Leviathan and Behemoth there, the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, foretold in Revelation. It says, the fish and everything that moves in the waters and everything that flies, the birds and all their kind. And the sun rose above them to prosper them, like the Basora shining on the world, right? And above everything that was on the earth, everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit-bearing trees, and all flesh. These three kinds he created on the fifth day. And on the sixth day he created all the animals of the earth, and all cattle, and everything that moves on the earth. And after all this, he created man. A man and a woman created he them, and gave him dominion over all that is upon the earth, and in the seas, and over everything that flies, and over beasts, and over cattle, and over everything that moves on the earth, and over the whole earth. And over all this he gave him dominion. And this is where the idea of man having sovereignty or kingship over everything comes from. It's established by the Almighty, but we're not given kingship over our fellow man. A father has authority over his children, but we don't have authority over every man. And these four kinds he created on the sixth day. And there were altogether 22 kinds, or 22 kinds. And he finished all his work on the sixth day, all that is in the Shamayim and on the earth, and in the seas, and in the waters, or abysses. Sorry. The abysses are the openings into the deep. There's 7 of them, just like there's 7 windows of the Shamayim. It says, and in the light, and in the darkness, and in everything. And he gave us a great sign, Yom HaShabbat, the Sabbath day, that we should work 6 days, but keep Shabbat on the 7th day from all work. And all the messengers of the presence and all the messengers of set apartness, these 2 great classes, he has bidden us to keep the Shabbat with him in the Shamayim and on earth. And he said to us, behold, I will separate unto myself a people from among all the peoples, and these shall keep the Shabbat day, and I will set apart them unto myself as my people, and I will barak them as I have set apart the Shabbat day, and do set it apart unto myself. Even so will I barak them, and they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. And I have chosen the seed of Jacob from amongst all that I have seen, and have written him down as my firstborn son, and have set apart him unto myself Leolam Wa'ed, or forever and ever, unto ages and witnessed. And I will teach them the Shabbat Yom, that they may keep Shabbat thereon from all work. Some people take exception that Yisrael alone is chosen to keep the Sabbath day. And they say, oh, it's meant for mankind. But I would ask anyone to consider, go back in history, look at the scriptures. Was it given to any other nation? The answer is obvious. It's not. It was never given to any other nation. It was always for his people, and anyone that wanted to sojourn with them had to become like them and called upon they joined them, they fellowshiped with them, they became one with them, and they were called by the nation to whom they sojourned with, or the tribe of whom they were adjoined to. The same is true with the renewed covenant times. We're just not all in one place now. It's spread throughout the world, but you still have to join his people and become grafted in. So it's always been exclusive. This is literally true. People can take offense to that, but it is what it is. You either want to deal with reality right? You don't want to be fighting against him. It says, and thus he created therein a sign in accordance with which they should keep Shabbat with us on the seventh day, to eat and to drink, and to barak him who has created all things, as he has Baruch, and set apart unto himself a peculiar people above all peoples, and that they should keep Shabbat together with us. And he caused his commands to ascend as a sweet savor, acceptable before him all the days. This is the first reference of his commands being like an offering to him. There are 22 heads of mankind from Adam to Yaakov, and 22 kinds of work were made until the seventh day. This is Baruch and Kadosh, and the 22 works that were made. This is Baruch and Kadosh, and the former is also Baruch and Kadosh, meaning the 22 heads of mankind, from Adam to Yaakov. And then it tells you, and this one serves with that one for set apartness and baraka, meaning the 22 heads go along with the 22 works, and they're for set apartness and baraka, blessing. This is what prompted me, along with other things in the scriptures, that he only speaks in parables. There's nothing that he doesn't say in parables, and that he's done it from the beginning. These are what prompted me to think and consider that perhaps this itself is a parable. And I want to give full credit to our brother Eric Bissell, who does the Erictology on YouTube, the Mountaineer Brothers YouTube channel as well. They have a lot of videos about it. He was the first one that I've ever seen mention anything about the Aleph Bet itself lining up with the creation account. And I give him full credit for being inspired to share that. The only difference between what he shares and what is right here is that I line up the Aleph Bet with the literal 22 works of creation as enumerated right here in the book of Yobelim, and he has it according to something else. You can look at his stuff and see. I don't want to go beyond that. But right here, he's telling us that they go together. It's not something that we're just making up. He literally said it. Now, putting it together and seeing what that is what we have to put the legwork in, where we come to the truth as little children, where when his taught ones couldn't know a thing, they came to him and he made known to them what he gave to everyone else in parables. And all willing, we can all do likewise and see that. This is, and to this it was granted that they should always be the Baruch and Kadosh ones of the first testimony in Torah. It says in italics right here, or in a bracket, Yaakov and his seed, but that's not true. It means, and to this, to Adam through Yaakov, from all of them, it was granted that they should always be the Baruch and Kadosh ones of the first testimony in Torah, even as he had set apart and Baruch the Shabbat day on the seventh day. And he created Shamayim and earth and everything he created in 6 days, and Yahuah made the seventh day set apart for all his works. Therefore, we are the works of his hands. He is the potter, we are the clay. Right? Therefore, he commanded on its behalf that whoever does any work thereon shall die, and that he who defiles it shall surely die. Wherefore do you command the children of Yisrael to observe this day, that they may keep it set apart, and not do thereon any work, and not to defile it, as it is more set apart than all other days. And whoever profanes it shall surely die. And whoever does thereon any work shall surely die eternally. That the children of Yisrael may observe this day throughout their generations, and not be rooted out of the land, for it is a Kodesh day and a Baruch day. It's a type of the millennial reign. If you don't keep it, then he's trying to say you're not going to be in the millennial reign, because one is a rehearsal for the other. And everyone who observes it and keeps Shabbat thereon from all his work will be Kadosh and Baruch throughout all days like unto us, the messengers of the presence and the messengers of set apartness. Declare and say to the children of Yisrael, of Yisrael, the Torah of this day, both that they should keep Shabbat thereon, and that they should not forsake it in the error of their hearts, that it is not lawful to do any work thereon which is unseemly, to do thereon their own pleasure, and that they should not prepare thereon anything to be eaten or drunk, and to draw water, or to bring in or take out thereon through their gates any burden which they had not prepared for themselves on the sixth day in their dwellings. Like if you make a picnic to go out to eat in the grass in your yard, there's nothing wrong with that. But deciding to move cinder blocks out of your barn and start building, no, right? And they shall not bring in or take out from house to house on that day, for that day is more kadosh and baruch than any Yobel day of the Yobelim. On this we kept Shabbat in the Shamayim before it was made known to any flesh to keep Shabbat thereon on the earth. And the Creator of all things, Baruch it, but he did not set apart all peoples and nations to keep Shabbat thereon, but Yisrael alone. Them alone he permitted to eat and to drink and to keep Shabbat thereon on the earth. And the Creator of all things, Baruch this day which he had created, for Baraka, and for making it Kadosh and splendid above all days. This Torah and testimony was given to the children of Yisrael as a Torah forever unto their generations. That's the common law that's still applicable for us, the generations of children from Abraham, that it was given to, right? All right, just one moment here. This is a little PDF that we put together. It was an email that we shared, but it's not fully filled out. If I had done it right, I'd have the strong numbers here to have the etymological dictionary page numbers where the meanings are, or the sources quoted for every meaning of every name, and it would be more uniform so you could see it. But as quickly as I can, I just want to show these to you. Generally, I put the letter, what was created, the meaning of the letter. Like if you go to the dictionary and you look up every entry for Aleph Lamed Pei and you see what it means as a word, and then you take that salad of definitions and you put it together where it just makes sense. I'm not adding any words. It's literally the meaning of it in a sentence where you put it all together. Um, and then you have the actual work that was accomplished. So we go through this 1 through 22, and you should see everything that was there. Some of these I don't have in that exact order. Like I said, I didn't mean to do it that way. This was quickly put together. So we'll just read through this real quick, and then I'll share with you. Well, hold on, I'll do this one. Aleph is the highest Shamayim, and it means, Aleph is a word, is I will teach and learn with my mouth to bring forth thousands, yoked together, domesticated, and trained. That might seem fantastic to someone with just that three-letter word, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But this whole thing, the highest Shamayim, and that what that represented was in the beginning, the voice of Yahuah was in the garden with Adam, teaching him. He was training him to be domesticated in his home. Exactly what this word Aleph, I will teach and learn with my mouth, means. So if you give me just one moment. All right, shalom, everyone. This is Ernest Klein's Comprehensive Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language for Readers of English. It's affectionately known as the Red Dictionary because that's the cover color, by Eric Bissell. This is a very, very well put together book. Nothing's perfect, but it is a great resource. I use this all the time when I'm looking up words in the Hebrew. And this is my main source of information for the letters and the meanings of words outside of the Strongs. When you go right here, I don't want to take too much time, but we can go to the letter Aleph. If we go right to the beginning of it, it'll tell you a little bit about the first word. It says the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The name of the letter is Aleph, and so called in allusion to its ancient Hebrew form representing the head of an ox. See Aleph and Aluf, Aleph, right? And that is with a wa, and that is without. But it's telling you different languages: Akkadian, Arabian, Phoenician, Greek, and the related word. And then it goes on to tell you some information about it, but that's not important for us. I just wanted you to see it does mention its original representation here. It tells you what it originally alludes to. And then you can go to the letter itself, just like it said to check that out. Sorry. Um, it helps if you're familiar with the letters. And if you're not, I'm not trying to bore you or have it take too long. But you just want to go until you get to Aleph Lamed Pei. And that's kind of like the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? H, I, J, K. And then you have L, M, N. So Lamed, Mem, Nun. Here we go. Aleph Lamed. And then you find the Pei. Um, Here is a related word. Aluf is one of the ones they said to look at. And you can see that means chief or of a tribe, an intimate friend. The Aleph, he says, but you have a loving one who is closer than a brother, right? It is also your master. The master of the Torah is an Aleph. It's also the rank. It means one or 1,000, which we're going to get to in just a moment. Aleph, Alim, that's not the right one. Sorry. The one thing about the dictionary here that is not as easy to use as the Strongs is that you have to hunt around. Sometimes you have to look at the word with a wa or a yod in it. Sometimes you have to look at it with a prefix like a mem connected to it. Um, Sometimes words will have different suffixes or prefixes attached with meanings that you have to discover when you're looking them up. But it's part of learning the language if you're interested in doing that. It's really wonderful. Okay, right here, Aleph. And this is, please bear with me. I'm going to go through these quickly, but Father willing, you'll see where it comes from. Aleph means to be linked together, to be connected, like yoked together, right? Was acquainted with, was familiar with, was accustomed to, was learned. He learned its confederates to be joined. Okay. It is he trained, he taught, he tamed, domesticated. And then it's was tamed, was taught, different. It's the same thing in different ways based off of its singular, plural, masculine, qualitative, the different types in the word structures there. But essentially it's to teach and learn, to be joined together, right? To bring forth thousands. It literally means 1,000 right here. It also means one. Aleph as a prefix, which we didn't cover here, but you can see it more in the scriptures. It's not always in the dictionaries. Aleph as a prefix literally means I will or I am. When you say I love you in Hebrew, it's ahabka, all one word. But so literally I will teach and learn with my mouth, which is what the pei is. That's Aleph Lamed Pei. I will teach and learn with my mouth, and that is to bring forth thousands, yoked together and trained, domesticated. It's all what this word means. And that's exactly what Yahushua did when you think about it. It's oxen, cows, bullocks, or cattle. That will be more applicable later when we get to the Resh. But you can see it's the tamed animals that are domesticated by being trained, by being yoked together. All of them are part of a tribe. So you see, these all are interconnected. And all I did was take the meaning of all of them separately and put it together in one form that made sense, which was exactly what he did at that time and what he's been doing from the beginning, teaching with his mouth to bring forth thousands yoked together, domesticated, and trained. Now, I'm not going to do that for every one of them, but I encourage you, test this. Don't just take my word for it, prove it. You'll find that bet, as broken down, is literally in, working. The yod is a working hand, and then the tau is a covenant. So in working the covenant, and then what bet means is a house. It means to be domesticated. So the ones that live in the house, that dwell in the earth, are the ones that become domesticated by listening to him. So there's a picture and a natural progression. I'm just going to read through it now, but I want you, don't just take my word on what these mean. Do take the time to look into it. It's the only way to prove it for yourself. Yeah, when we get the chance, we can really dig in and everyone can see it for themselves that way. But until then, you don't just want to believe people blindly. Bet, in working the covenant, it's the earth or the land, the place for us to combat to righteousness. What the meek will inherit, the perfect will be left in, but the strong will be shaken out of. It's what man is appointed, Seth, after the fall. And it is, the meaning of bet is to be domesticated and trained in a home. Gimel, the waters. Yagmal, with a yod in front of it, means to wean a child. Gimel by itself is a camel or reward or recompense. It's what goes out with what your product and comes back with the return, if you will. So it's what goes out and comes back with your pay, reward, or recompense, like water sending out ripples that come back many-fold. As we do, it will be done unto us, a good measure poured in our lap. It lines up with Enosh, a man, but in the sense of weak and diseased or mortal. This is mortal man. And it literally lines up with, I didn't put it there, but in the beginning of his children, in how Adam was towards his father, his son was towards him, where he killed the firstborn of the Almighty in what he did. His firstborn killed his son in what he did. It played out in a, as you do, it will be done unto you. Yigmal in his children. So that was the gimel there, like the waters that are coming out, the ripple effect of the things you're going to get coming to you. And you see this again over and over through history. It happened with Aharon and his children, and how he delivered up the two kingdoms, or the 12 tribes, in two houses, if you will, before they were broken into two houses. He gave up to idolatry in the wilderness, and his two sons, given up to using strange fire, were consumed by it. So it's the same picture here. But right here, Dalet is all the Ruach oath, or spirits that serve before him. The Dalet literally is a door. It's a decision point from one to another. It's a column of a book, the first line of a verse, or it's a change of state. In Greek, in math, the Dalet is a change of state. The free will to make a choice, and also all the messengers cause a change of state in the things they were given to do. If you look at it, that's a line up with the Dalet there. And it lines up with Canaan, to fit together, fabricate, also a dirge or lamentation with beating of breast. So there's dual meanings in the word, and it all is fitting for the things that came after, where you had the decision point, the two kingdoms, and you had the sons of Cain and then the sons of Seth, the chosen ones and the forsaken. Hay is the abysses. The abysses is tohum, but tohum is a word. It means tohu is to be empty, waste, desert, chaos, confusion, vanity, nothingness, worthlessness, waterless desert, trackless wilderness. He got lost or wandered about, went astray, was amazed and astonished. That is what tohu means. When you add the mem at the end, tohum, that means an abyss or the abyss is. But when the land was first made, it was tohu wabohu, or it was void and empty, as it's translated. When the watchers came and they caused children to go astray in empty wildernesses and trackless wastes, it was like the abysses being created. That's what's represented here as the hey, what is revealed or made evident, like pointed out like light through a window. It says it's what is revealed and made evident. This is Mahalalel. He was the patriarch that would line up with this, which is the praiseworthy El, and the means or place of praising El, right? Because what is made known is the wrong way to go and the right way, the truth in what we should do based off the children of Set and Cain, respectively. You can see the ones that were approved and the ones that were not. And that was a place and the means of praising him. It says, please note, this is after the third or fourth generation of them that hate him, meaning when Adam first sinned, meaning since Adam sinned. Yeah. This pattern is repeated when idolatry is introduced amongst men and again in the commandments, and also the pattern of three righteous afterwards leading to multitudes. So every time you can find where there's sin brought in by men, where they willingly do a thing that they ought not to, 4 generations go by, third or fourth before that is able to be overcome. It happened with Adam here. It happened again, like I said, when they brought in idolatry. It was 4 generations till Abraham. When the children sold their brother into captivity, it was the 4th generation from them that came out of Egypt. So there's all these different patterns, okay? I'm sorry. The 3rd came out, the 4th went into the promised land, just to be clear. Wa, the darkness, is man's current condition. It's pinned or fixed in place, which is what the wa means. It's free or until freed by the light. And this is Yarad, which is he will come down. Jared, they say, right? Man, so for the watchers being sent to teach men righteousness, but 200 went apostate and caused the giants, monsters, and all the evils still plaguing us today. And that would be the darkness that is attached to man's current condition, which they say the Wa is the 6th letter, and the 6th letter is the letter of man, right? And then Zion, the light, Yom, or day, evening, and morning, which he prepared in the knowledge of his heart. It equals the arms or weapons, which is what a Zion is. It's a weapon to arm, to adorn, to ornament, to decorate. And this is lines up with Hanok, dedicated or trained, and he was shown all things and comprehended what he was shown. He was witness to men of his age and all until the end, and also the righteous sentence against Adam and Cain. So all of this stuff happened in this 7th work. Hanok was exalted, the righteous, the witnesses or the watchers were witnessed against. The judgment against Adam and Cain all happened at this time, where the light, the righteous truth of what he said was finally accomplished. Okay, exactly lining up with the events that happened. Yom 2, Chait is the firmament in the midst of the waters, which the letter Chait right here is a wall. It's an enclosure, and it's also the living creatures. The only time you find Chait Yod Tet anywhere in scripture, it's the living creatures that went into the ark with Noah, which this happens to line up with the flood and that very event. The Yagmal is the only place I'm familiar with you find the first reference of the Gimel, and that's when Cain was born. So these, I don't know about the letter Bet with the earth other than Bereshit there, or if these all line up in that significant way, but I did find it interesting that they do allude to them here, and it possibly would throughout the original text that we had pointed out. kind of like the Psalms do when they have the acoustic psalm where it lines up with the alphabet. That's another thing you can, please don't take my word for it, but prove me on this. Every single psalm that has the alphabet lined up with it, you can line up to the creation account right here, and you can see the letter corresponds with that work in history every time. It's an amazing thing. Please prove it for yourself. It helps you get a fuller picture of the work that he's doing, the wonders that we're supposed to be thinking on, literally hidden in parables here. But it says, this is the firmament separating the waters above the firmament from the waters below. It's equal to a wall enclosure of the living creatures, which lines up with the patriarch or the Methuselah, which his death shall bring, or the death of him sent. And they survived the flood by the living being separated or enclosed, the living being enclosed in the ark, right? So this is all day 2, the only work he created on the second day. Then these are more paraphrased here, but Tet is the waters being drained in all the water courses. The Tet itself is a full basket of his stuff within a container with the X marks it, right? And that is lining up with Lemech, which is the despairing. And it says, after the flood, the children of men went into error at Babel. He caused them to he caused the change of language and spread men out into their own peoples, nations, languages, tribes, and tongues, which was what the Tet represents. And again, every letter and every work corresponds to what he is doing, not what others are doing. So what men building the tower isn't the thing, but the response of it is what's mentioned here, right? Then you have Yod, the seed and all sprouting things. It's the work of his hands and his working hand, the promises and the covenants he set and is working to establish. That's what the seed is, the covenants that he established that he's working to fulfill. And that lines up with Noach, comfort and rest, given to Abram when he repented, sorry, also when he gave his word to the children. So the first covenant was foreshadowed with Noach, and then the full covenant was given to Abraham, and that's what this represents. And then every covenant, the 10 commandments and the covenant given to the children at Mount Sinai is also part of this Yod. It's all part of that work that he's doing. And that's that order in history. After the separation of the nations, he gave the covenants. All right. And then after the covenant to his people, it's the fruit-bearing trees and the trees of the wood, which is the letter Kaf. The letter Kaf is like the open palm. As a prefix, it means like or resemble. As a suffix, it means you or yours. So we are supposed to be like and resemble the fruit-bearing trees and trees of the wood after we got the covenant, which represents the children during the times of the judges, right? And it lines up with the letter Shem. That's his name, where he's known, his fame, renown, exactly what would be the fruit-bearing trees, shining his light. Lamed is the Garden of Eden, in Eden and all. Lamed is a word like Talmudim, Talmud, Lamed right there, is to teach and learn. To poke, pull, goad. It means the time of Dawid and Shalomo in exaltation, and all the way through the casting away, captivities, regathering, and into the time of the Maccabees. All of that is the letter Lamed in his work of what he was doing to teach and learn, right? And it was also cast away the weeds and thorns and thistles through the captivity and return and the time of the Maccabees. It lines up with a Parkshad, and his name in it's the book from Francis Rosalind called the Mazaroth. It's about the constellations, the Hebrew meanings of the stars. He goes through the patriarchs' names, and he has an etymology for a Parkshad that means a congregation appointed, perfectly fitting with the thing here and with the work that he did. Mem Remember, after he did this, he came himself as the Son, the light, the bridegroom. Okay. But Mem is the Son, the steadfast servant that runs the course set before him, our Mashiach, the light of the world, and it is equal to Selach, or the sent one, the sent out one. Noon is the moon, the living one that's constantly like a fish in the water. If you remember in the book of Hanok, it says that the moon is constantly increasing and decreasing in illumination from the sun. So constantly moving, constantly with life like the noon there. But that's the moon. It represents the Malkuth Shamayim, or the kingdom of heaven. Her light is increased and decreased, and the kingdom exalted or made desolate for the nourishment and growth of all the living. Meaning for us to learn and grow, that by obedience we're exalted, by disobedience made desolate, right? To teach us. And it lines up with Eber, or to cross over. Samik is the stars, the children of light. Sorry, that should say the children of light, right? Running the course sent before them, who knows him who names them and shows forth him who numbers them. This lines up with Peleg, or divided. And he divides them all in their own separate courses. All of the taught ones were spread out. These are the assemblies that were built, sun, moon, and stars. Our Mashiach came, gave the good news of the Malkuth, and built the assemblies of the children of light. And that was representative of Yom 4 of creation. Day 5, Ayin is the sea monsters. Now, Ayin, it doesn't mention it here, but it's to perceive, to see, to consider, right? It's the sea monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth, the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, and it equals bearing our iniquity after he came, and it lines up with the patriarch Reu, or his evil. Pe, the open mouth, is the fish of the sea and the teeming life of the oceans. Remember, he came to make them fishers of men, and this is after he came and the sea monsters are established. It was the clean fish that are permissible to be caught. It says only those with fins and scales that navigate the waters and reflect the light are acceptable, but they die when caught by the fishers of men, representing the martyrs during the Dark Ages. And this is serug, or intertwined twig or branch. And then Zaudi, birds of the air and all flying things. Zaudi is literally a bird or a hunter. It's the time of the hunters, hunted, and those who flee away and migrate. After the open martyrdoms and persecutions for a long time, you had them fleeing to Britain, fleeing to the Americas, fleeing persecution, representative of like Jacob fleeing Edom and not fighting his brother. And it lines up with the patriarch Nahor, which is snort or a snorting, charred or scorched, and even noble or freeman. And these are amazing. I couldn't make this up if I wanted to. I didn't come up with these. I can't remember exactly where it was, but this was the time where his noble and free men who were fleeing like birds from those that persecuted them were literally being burned at the stake, charred and scorched, and snorted at in derision. And that was right before the Reformation. Okay. Day 6, Kof. The living creatures, or long reach after this, is those with the breath of life, but within, that's what Kof means, is a long reach after this. It's like a monkey. Literally, a Kof is a monkey. And it lines up with the living creatures which were created. They have the breath of life, but without the comprehension of man, and not banded together. That's one of the keys. They're not the cattle. It lines up with Terach, the old fool or wild goat. Yobelim says he was named so because they were brought to destitution by the birds, which we'll get to, and it was because of the idolatry that was brought in by men. Okay? This is the time of Wycliffe and the pre-runners of the Reformation. Now, that becomes more significant when you look into Revelation, the Antichrist for Dummies, and literally the second woe. the culmination of it was the Wycliffe translation, which was from the Latin Vulgate. And Wycliffe did an amazing thing for men, bringing the truth to light. He's not faulted for that by our Maker at all. It was from the Latin Vulgate, which was a perverted version that he didn't know, and it carried over the wrong names. And it was the fulfillment of the second woe, where his refuge would be lost. The refuge of our Mashiach is the name of Yahuah. Please don't take my word for that. You can go to any Bible app, just type in refuge and read all the entries. Go to the Strongs and find it. You'll see that the refuge of the poor, the refuge of the lost, the refuge of his people, the refuge of his Mashiach is literally the name of Yahuah, the name of Elohim. And that was the thing that was literally taken out of the world at that time, where his name, Yahuah and Yahushua, was removed from the speaking people's memories and from written record. The Wycliffe translation was part of that, as it was foretold, lining up right here with these things as well. After that time, 1390s on, Resh, the cattle. The cattle are those that are domesticated and trained in herds. So this is the people that are in the house, the domesticated ones that have listened to the Aleph, right? Resh as a word is the first, sometimes the last, right? Because it's one of the last letters. So it's the first that will be last, the last that will be first, right? It also means head, and it means poor. Rosh is poor, but also means the head or first or something, the principle or head of it. It lines up with the Reformation, those that were in herds or together and domesticated, not like the wild living creatures that were not. And that is in line with Abram or Abraham, exalted father and father of many nations, which are the Protestant nations of today. Sheen is the creeping creatures. I titled this or labeled it the Counter-Reformation, but that might be more of a misnomer. The Counter-Reformation was what the adversary has used to accomplish the creeping creature effect in our Creator's children. If you know, creeping creatures are everything unclean and not profitable. Some of them you should not touch while dead. Others you weren't even supposed to touch while alive, when they were prohibited in that capacity. And these things are the type and characteristics of his people who've backslidden from the Reformation, just like rats, just like vile vermits, just like the unclean animals. And that's why you see all these studies and lab tests done with all these animals that are similar to humans, they say, in their characteristics and mannerisms and things that they're learning and studying, not necessarily morally, but the parallel with the use of them and the things that you can see men doing is intentional with these times that we're living in right here. And it lines up with Yitzhak, which is hilarious laughter. Remember the promised seed to Abraham, but also the fact that he mocks those who rise up against him, which is what he's doing with the sons of Yitzhak that are backslidden. He's making a mockery of them. And we can see the proof of it right now today in history. Look at the degradation of white people if you want to. It's a veneer against the Saxons, Anglo-Saxons, you call them what you want, but that is the mocking against his people for the creeping creature behaviors that we're doing. And if you want to go into detail for these, the Epistle of Barnabas and the letter of Aristes go into greater detail about the characteristics of the unclean animals and how it applies to men, but it's in line with the two spirits. What we choose to emulate is the one we serve. And then the last work that we're living through that we're going to be having, it's his work in progress right here is Tau, which is the end, the mark, sign, or covenant. But it is Adam, right? I am the likeness, Adama. Dhamma means likeness or image. Yahu Dhamma was the original Buddha, and he was Yahuwah like. That's for a different time, but it's that same word. Adam is the likeness, or I will bleed. And it's the man in his likeness and image. Although when you go back to Bereshit and you look at it, it says only in his image he was made. It says image and likeness, and then it says in the image of Elohim made he them, meaning that the likeness was in the course of time. This is why it was fulfilled through history instead of at the beginning. But it's the end state and finished work, his sign or oath completed. Tell Jacob or Yisrael, he has his reward returning at the hill of what he's doing, Jacob, and he who strives with men in El and has overcome, a prince of El. And this is the last work of his hands before the millennial reign. I dare say it's what he's trying to accomplish right now with his body waking up. But it is the last thing he does before the end. I can't say it's completed yet. This Reformation was 500 years ago. Some of these things have taken an extremely long amount of time. Look at the letter Lamed in itself. The Lamed by itself was almost 1,000-year period. So I can't say that these are absolute literal periods. These are exact, but this is literally the work that he did in its order, absolutely provable through demonstrable evidence in his word in scripture. And it lines up with every letter and the meaning of it. You can't make it up, and it's easily seen if you take the time to look. So, Father willing, that was edifying, or will be for everyone that chooses to prove this out for themselves. If you have any comments or questions about things, don't hesitate to ask. And you all have a great Shabbat, a great Shavua Tov or week ahead, and we will talk to you next time. Shalom.